Derrell,
Yes.
it's an honor to have you here in my home to cook meatballs and connect over our shared passion for food. So welcome to What Lights Us Up.
Ow. Welcome. I appreciate that warm welcome.
Well, thank you so much for for coming over.
Absolutely.
So I want to tell everybody sort of how we were connected initially, but I do believe it sort of manifested at the perfect time that we were supposed to connect. So we were connected about 3 years ago. We both went to Syracuse.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Go Orange.
Go Orange. We weren't there at the same time, but you played football for Syracuse.
Yep.
And I had self-published my cookbook, and someone at Syracuse had recommended that we get in touch because we both lived in LA. And I remember emailing back and forth, and then you were always in the back of my mind like, okay, we never connected, we never met, but I would love to meet him someday. And then fast forward to 3 years, I have this podcast, and I went to that Bayheim event. And I remember asking around, okay, there was this guy that I was connected with by email. I have to go back and find the email. Is he here? He played football and now he cooks meatballs. I'm like, I need to talk to this person. And they're like, no, he's not here. But, you know, maybe, I think he did an event the night before or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like, shoot, okay.
You cooked for the after party.
Yes, which of course I wasn't invited to because I'm not like in the know. But, and then a friend of mine literally 3 months later texted me with this event that you were doing. You were hosting the catering event for Syracuse, game watching event. I got the text. I'm like, I don't care where it is. I have to drive an hour to go. Like, I need to meet this person immediately. And now that I have this podcast, I want to connect with you because I feel like we have a lot in common, but also to feature this unique story of literally football to meatballs. Like, insane. Like, what a unique story, an inspiring story. So what inspired this journey from knowing that you wanted to be in football, going to Syracuse, having this brief NFL career, and then literally having pop-ups all over LA and your own cooking show?
What inspired it was being let go from a job. I think that'll inspire anybody. So I don't know. I came up with the meatball recipe while I was in college. It's not my grandmother's. It's inspired by the women who taught me how to cook. So I grew up cooking with my mom, my grandma, all the women in my family. It would allow me to come into the kitchen, help them out in the kitchen, lick the cake bowl, wash the dishes. And so I always just grew up around food. Went to Syracuse and I would cook for teammates here and there. When you play football in college, you really don't get to go home. So all of the holidays, I would stay behind. Thanksgiving, we would either go to a coach's house, but then by the time I was a junior, senior, I would cook for me and my friends. Or we would just all cook together, like have a little potluck. And loved that. By the time I got to graduate school, I was already in the NFL. And in the NFL, you got money to play with. So I would just come home, I would play around with these different recipes. And during the off season, I went back to Syracuse to finish up a few classes for my master's degree. And while I was there, I remember coming home after class and I had everything I needed to make meatballs with. Started to make meatballs and sauce. And I remember as soon as I made it, and it was really the sauce. The meatball recipe wasn't there just yet. But the sauce recipe that I made was like mind blowing. And I was like, I'm gonna sell this one day. So I remember hitting up my best friend and saying like, come through, we got a winner. Came through, he tasted it. And I remember telling him, I'm gonna sell this one day. Fast forward, out of the NFL, working in advertising in New York City, and I would bring meatballs to my job to get my team to stay late. I was a producer and like I had to bribe them somehow. And made this meatball recipe, and my boss was like, you should enter this into this competition coming up. So I did, and I won. Best meatball in Brooklyn, 2016. And a couple weeks later, started an LLC, submitted them to be in Smorgasburg, which is a huge outdoor market in Brooklyn. We sell out each week there while I still worked full-time in advertising. And then a couple months later, April 2017, I was let go from that job and just decided to do it full-time. And so the inspiration really just came from having the ingredients in my kitchen, making a recipe, and over time perfecting it to a point where I knew that it was so good that I had to have other people try it. And that was kind of the impetus to like me putting it out there, like having the faith to just put it out there. And then from that moment on, once I realized that those people liked it and my taste was validated, then I was able to take it and keep on expanding. And the product just speaks for itself. I'm able to do all of those things because it's good, and I know it's good. And I'm gonna keep putting it in places where people can appreciate how good it is.
I love that. And you also had a light that you saw within yourself of making it. But I want to touch on one thing. As you're telling your story, not everyone has that drive. I think it's incredible that you not only played football, but you said in your spare time, or when I had spare money, I chose to do this with my time.
Oh, yeah.
You felt this passion to cook and make the sauce and share it with others. What sort of helped you follow that passion to actually turn it into a business? Because you could have just said, oh, this is a passion. I'm gonna make meatballs. I don't know what's gonna happen one day, but let's just make meatballs and cook, or we're hungry on a holiday, we can't go home, we wanna eat, and this is great. What helped you actually turn it into a business? And maybe it was something you learned in football, sort of fundamentally.
Well, football, I would say, gives me my drive, my courage, and my confidence, for sure. And it also taught me a work ethic. Discipline is, if you have discipline in general, like I think that's something that a lot of people just don't have. And so, being as though I grew up playing all types of sports my entire life, my discipline level is just a little different than people who haven't had that type of training or that type of practice their whole entire life. I would say when it comes to a business, that was actually, I blame a teacher in grad school who had taught us this method. Professor Sheehan, like he actually had me speak in his class after I told him.
Really?
Yeah, he hit me up. He was like, oh, I want to interview you for my class. And he was like, oh, like, ask me the same question. I was like, it was you who gave me this idea. And I remember we were in his class one time and he gave this lesson about Pareto principle, 80-20. But his idea of it was 70-20-10. He was like, when I was the CEO of this company, our investment strategy was 70-20-10. 70% of our money, time, resources go into tried and true things. If you invest in today, it would be like Disney or IBM or Coca-Cola. Legacy brands, if I put 70% into it, I'm gonna get 70% back. 20% new and emerging. That would be Tesla. It would be maybe renewable energy, something that's coming up, new and emerging. Like I'll put 20% of my time, effort, resources into that thing in hopes of getting 20% back. If I don't, it's fine. But if I do, then we got a winner because I got my 70%. I'm not really worried about this 20%. Then that last 10% is wild and crazy shit. And with wild and crazy shit, it's just like anything you want to do. Personally, I love to write. And so I write on my 10% of time, right? If you were thinking about it from an investment strategy, it would probably be like NFTs or cryptocurrency, something along those lines where it's like, it's volatile. You really don't understand what's going into it. But if you put 10% of effort into it, it's not really going to affect that 70% or like the things that you got going on over here. And when I heard that lesson, I kind of adopted that as my lifestyle. And at the time, my 70% was football. And I invested 70% of my time into that, and it gave me 70% back. And when I had that free time, that 20% became just food, recipes. And it wasn't something, since I had the income from that 70%, I could kind of just pump into that food. And it was cheeseburgers, it was meatballs, it was just like anything meat that I could kind of play around with because I had the sauce recipe. And then over time, just continue to break down that sauce until I got it to where it is. Continue to experiment with meatballs till I got that where it was. And then 10% back then was just like whatever, like the things that I was interested in. Fast forward, I moved to advertising. Now advertising takes the place of football. Football
Right.
is way out of the picture. And now it goes from advertising to food still at 20%. And then at 10%, like I said, I love to write. So I'll write down ideas, just write little things down. And basically what I'm saying was that he taught me how to practice all the time. He taught me how to always practice and to make time for all of these different interests that I have and to invest fully into it. It ain't got to be 100%, but it has to be 100% of 20% or 100% of 10%, 100% of 70%. And with football, it taught me the discipline to be able to pump that into whatever percentage I gave it. And over time, I'm able to be like Captain Kirk in the chair, Star Trek, and I'm just like, all right, meatballs slow down and pump up TV at this point in time. Boom, that slows down, we'll pump this back up. And I'm able to do it because I've always practiced these things. And when it was time for me to not pivot, but just like pull the throttle up on the other one, I was prepared for it because I practiced. And I would say I was able to start a business out of it because when my opportunity came, when I won that meatball competition and realized people liked it, I practiced enough to be able to be prepared for that moment. And I took the right steps to put me in a position to get where I am today, where I could sell it at will. Like I could do multiple things with food because I practiced for all this time.
That's incredible. That is such valuable advice, especially as I'm, I went through a layoff as well last summer, and I decided that I was going to take a chance on myself and do consulting to pay the bills. I sort of had this inkling in the back of my mind thinking, I really want to do this. I think I'd be good at it. I have the skill that's valuable. I don't want a company to control my power, what happens in my destiny. And then I was also, prior to the layoff, I started this podcast about 4 months prior, and I was interviewing all of these entrepreneurs that created businesses out of passions.
Yep.
And I felt like an imposter, and I'm interviewing these people and I'm going to a job that I hate, that's literally dragging me down. And I get so much light from this podcast. And it was this pivotal moment in my life where I said, I'm gonna take this runway and I'm gonna try this on my own. And I do struggle a little bit with the time, sort of dedicating time for the podcast versus time for the clients. And then, I realize I have to give myself grace. I'm just starting out.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for someone that's facing a layoff? Because there's a lot of people out there that are facing layoffs. And for some people to work a corporate job, it's okay. It's what they want to do. And for some people, they're thinking, probably listening to this podcast, thinking, how do I find my passion? Or I found my passion, how do I take that leap? What advice would you have for them? I know we both experienced it where we faced a layoff. We've decided to take that jump past that fear to go after what lights us up.
I would say my advice is just practice it. Practice what you are interested in, and then you kind of know when it's time. Like it's not really something where one person can tell you like, oh, it's the right moment at this time. Like if somebody lays you off, like go right into it. No, that might not be your path. But I think that when you know, it kind of happens naturally because I don't know, like I was in the same situation where I was in a job and I loved my career. Like I truly loved advertising. I loved NFL. I loved advertising. There were parts of it that I didn't like as well. But I liked the environment. I liked the people that I worked with. I liked the community. I liked like the quirkiness of being in an office or the intimacy of being in a locker room. Like all of those things I truly enjoyed. But at the same time, I knew that there was something that just kept tugging me. Like if I keep coming back to this one thing, I mentioned whether I was in football, whether I was in advertising, that 20% was always consistent. Like I was always cooking for people. And I knew that the feeling that I got when I cooked for people was something that I was interested in and brought me light, or it brought me joy. And so when I decided to pump more effort into it, I started to get that feeling more. And I just went on faith. Like it really wasn't something that was premeditated. It wasn't something where I sat around and I was like, man, I'm gonna start a company, and if I get fired, it wasn't like that. It was like I got fired and I was like, all right, I just don't care to look for a job anymore. Like I have something that that I can control. Like I can control this thing. You know what I mean? Like I can control what I can control, and I know that people like these meatballs. I just got out of Smorgasburg. We would sell out every week. I know people like it. Now it's up to me to find different places where I could sell it to more people who like it. And I kind of approached it from that standpoint versus it being, oh, I'm going to live the rest of my life off of this one decision. Like I didn't think that deep about it. It was just like, all right, like I just need to find more people to like it. I'll sell one. If I can sell two, I'll sell four, I'll sell 8. And then just keep building off of that momentum versus it being like, my life is screwed. Like, I don't have a job anymore. Like, nah, it was just like, all right, what's the first step to me selling 2 of them? And then beyond that, how I'm going to sell more of it. And I just kept hustling. And for the first 3 months, I remember the first 3 months, I would try like everything. I was like I'm handsome. I'm going to go model. I tried like doing that and went to the wrong model agencies who I had to pay. So I had to take my money back and like, all right, settle down. Like, you know what your product is. Let's focus on that. And then wild thing is, I'll never forget this. 3 months later, I was let go from my job, April 18, 2017. And the one of my OGs at the office was having a party and they needed food. And so he hired me to bring food to the office. The same company that fired me, who walked me out of the building. I remember walking back in as a vendor of theirs. So I left as a fired employee, and 3 months later, I came back as a vendor who they had to pay for my entrepreneurial service. And I just remember the pride I felt, like, damn, like, this is crazy. Like, this is how it happens. You know what I mean? And that was 2017. And now 2024, like, I've cooked everywhere. I've cooked around the world. I've served meatballs to Elmo. Like, I've done a lot of things. Yeah, like I've been able to do so many different things. And it's all because like I just decided to not do something I didn't want to do. And it was that simple. Like it wasn't, like I said, I didn't think too much about it. It was just like, I don't want to do that. So let's figure out how to do this.
Something you don't want to do.
Yeah.
That is so key.
That's it.
So let's unpack exactly how you moved from Brooklyn, where you were doing, the meatball contest and cooking for your old advertising company, to literally cooking all over the world, having your own cooking show, doing pop-ups all over LA, because now you're in LA. How did you go from New York to LA and build this?
New York to LA. So when I was let go from my job, I started doing corporate catering. Somehow got into it. A teammate of mine, actually from Syracuse, was working for a company that had a service where we show up to offices and we would serve lunch to these different companies. And I did that from 2017 till pandemic 2020. I was actually catering in an office when the news came on. First it was Kobe died. Kobe died in February, and I remember seeing that. And then the other headline was like, yo, there's something happening, and just be aware because shit might get crazy soon. I remember being in the office, I was like, damn, that's crazy. Kobe died. I didn't really think about that other thing. And February was Black History Month. Black Chef, man, I was killing it. I was killing it in New York. It was so great, making so much money. And then that next month, March, I remember everything just shut down. So by that time, we were doing corporate catering. We also had to stand in Smorgasburg. And we had a licensing deal with Levy Restaurants in Barclays Center where they would make Amazeballs and serve it at the stadium and just use our recipe, produce the whole thing, and then we would get the residual from that. And then I also was the resident chef at Bed Bath Beyond, where each week I would come in and I was a big black Rachel Ray. You come into Bed Bath Beyond, it was the only studio kitchen of its kind in the
New
country.
York?
Yep, it was at Industry City, New York. And only kind that they had in the country. And I did that for 3 years. I got that job 2007 into 2017. And I did that every single week for 3 years. Hence, TV came natural because I was in front of an audience every week, and I would have to literally cook all of the food, explain to you how I'm cooking, cook more food, and then serve you the food that I actually cooked while being filmed in front of a crew. And so it kind of like was like theater for food, and did that for 3 years. Pandemic hit, all of it shut down. Like every single thing I had was all in-person things where I was serving food to people. And I remember during the pandemic, I started filming just in my apartment something called Cooking with Uncle Rel, where it was kind of like whimsical, but I felt as though it was like my duty to teach all of these people who are now home and don't know how to cook, but also entertain them in the process. 5-minute videos, kept doing it.
You did it yourself?
Did it myself, yeah.
Okay.
And I lived with somebody at the time, and she would film me, and
Okay.
so just produced that show.
And put it on YouTube?
Put it on Instagram. It was just
On
like, it was
Instagram.
for friends. Like
Sure.
I did it for friends. And over the years, like I've been flying out. I would fly out to LA. I would do stuff with Tastemade. And
They found you how? From Instagram or?
well, they found me because of Bed Bath Beyond.
Okay.
So the content, we had negotiated a deal where I owned that content from Bed Bath Beyond as well.
Okay.
And so I was able to post that. I would post that on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
And a friend of mine was working with Tastemade as talent, and he was the camera person for that talent.
Okay.
And so he introduced me to Tastemade in 2018. And then they were like, oh, we like it. Flew me out 2018, we did a show. Flew me out again, we did a longer show. And then we had a deal where I like literally went around the world, like Brazil, California, Canada, Texas, and we would basically create menu items for brands based on like YouTube data. And did that for a year. And then after that, same thing, like they would just fly me out to do certain videos. Pandemic hit, they would pay me to take over their Instagram handle. And so I had that relationship with Tastemade all of those years. And then by the time pandemic hit, we were already kind of like, we knew each other. In the pandemic, I'll fast forward, still just like hustling. Like George Floyd had passed, he was killed during the pandemic. And so a friend of mine had organized these dinners for the protests. And so she would pay me to cook. I was making macaroni and cheese with brisket on top, and they would take them to the protests and hand them out to the people who were protesting.
Oh,
so
wow.
that was pretty cool. Got to make money doing stuff like that. Tastemade doing the video stuff. And so it was the same thing. Like that 70% at one point was me doing all of these corporate caterings, the Bed Bath Beyond. Once that hit, I kind of shifted, and I was still cooking, and that the 20% was me feeding the people for the protest. But then that 70% became, I started doing a cooking show. I started doing more content. I started doing lives, because that was a big thing during the pandemic. Like all of these live sessions where people were just cooking, started doing the lives, and it got me a little more confident in front of the camera, or comfortable, like being able to watch myself.
Right.
Fast forward November 2020. At the time, it was just like, we were in Brooklyn. It was tight. It was, I've never seen Brooklyn like that. Like Brooklyn is, or New York in general is such a buzzy city. And I remember during the pandemic, it was like a pin could drop on the street and what's that outside? Like that feeling of just like, damn, like this is crazy. Like I've never seen anything like this. But then at the exact same time, it was cool because when you're in a community like that, every day at 7 p.m., we take out our pots and the whole city just banging on the pots with wooden spoons. It was like, that was the kind of solidarity that we had. But I still needed to get out of it. So decided to move to LA. Didn't have a job, didn't have anything, but I had a shoot coming up with Tastemade that next month after we got here in December. And I remember we shot 3 episodes that day, and at lunch, they pulled me to the side like, yo, we would like to offer you a show. All right, cool. So that was kind of how it started. Like, came out here with nothing, did a few shoots as soon as I got out here, like I had that shoot lined up, did good, and during lunch they were like, "Oh, we'd like to offer you a show," and I was like, "All right, bet.
Wow.
Let's do it."
Now, what did you imagine doing growing up? I mean, thinking about growing up, did you always want to play football? Was it cooking? Like, what did you imagine doing? And would you ever have imagined today that you would be doing this?
Yes and no. Like, I would say my gift is electricity. Like, I'm dynamic, and I know that. Like, I don't need anybody. I don't need football to tell me that. I don't need food to tell me that. I don't need anything to tell me that. And I've always known that. And I think that I've always found myself in positions where I could showcase how dynamic I am. And with football, the way that you're rewarded for that is by a captain. I was a captain in football. I was team MVP my senior year at Syracuse. High school, same thing. I was Gatorade Player of the Year. Meatballs, I won a meatball competition my first ever time.
Which is insane.
Against all Italian grandmas in Brooklyn too. So, but I knew I would do it. Like, it wasn't something where I went into it and I went into it with just doubt in my mind. I'm not going to do it unless I know I'm going to win. And so when I got into it, if I didn't win, I would have been surprised, just because of the amount of time and effort that I put into it, and also just my taste. Like, I know how things are supposed to taste. Like, that's what I got from my mom, my grandma, and just that taste of food and that spirit. And because I'm electric, like, I think that whatever I approach, like whether it's food, whether it's football, whether it's advertising, whether it's creativity or imagination, I view it as a way to express myself. And so when you saw me on the football field, like, the way I played was an expression of my character, of my person. When you taste my food, that's an expression of me. And when you taste it, it's like, damn, that tastes like that man right there. Like it's something about it. It's kind of quirky, it's whimsical, but it's delicious. That's me as a person. And when it came to the meatballs, it was the same thing. Like, I went into it and I was like, oh, I could beat all of them. And it was no brainer. And so I think that is my gift. Like, I go into every single thing that I do with that same type of confidence, just because I don't know how to do it no other way. And I've always had that. And so when it comes to food, football, TV, of course I thought I would be here, because, like, if I did it, if it was within that 70-20-10 and I started to put effort into it and I liked it, eventually I know I'll do it. And I think, like, during the pandemic, it really became a reality that I could have a TV show. And so when I knew it, when I saw the content that I was putting up on at Bed Bath Beyond, and I saw my progression over time, like, damn, I'm getting more comfortable. Like, I'll watch it and I'll be like, man, I'm funny. Like, that was funny. I could do more. I could do that more. I knew that I had a chance. And the fact that I already had a relationship with Tastemade, I knew that it was something would happen because I had the relationship with them. And I was already put in these positions to succeed, and every time they put me in that position, I did it. And so I knew that it would be a matter of time before something happened. I didn't know what it would be, but I knew that I had the personality, I had the charisma, and I had the practice that when it was time to do it, I would succeed at it.
And the drive.
Like, I mean, that's who I am as a person. That's something that I can't, like, really teach. It's just who I am as a person.
Right.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you had a few sure moments where you were like, I know I'm good at this.
Oh, absolutely.
I know I'm good at this. I have this vision. Mm-hmm. And then you took aligned action.
Yep.
Right? I mean, I think, I really do believe that's how we can manifest things that we want to happen in our life. Mm-hmm. Just like I created this podcast, I felt a calling. I had started my cookbook. I felt a calling to have conversations with other people who have mm-hmm. created things that have literally lit them up.
Yep.
And what a powerful conversation we can have. And the podcast basically took off, which led me on a path I could never have imagined, setting me up for being laid off mm-hmm. and for taking that jump and really changing the trajectory of my life. Mm-hmm. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how we can manifest our visions into reality.
I would say just do it. Like you have to practice. It won't happen if you don't practice, and you have to be intentional about your practice, because from all of the sports and athletics I grew up in, like you have to practice certain things. Like you practice your weaknesses. You practice watching yourself practice. Like that's all it is. Like just practice, 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 and then when the lights come on, like whatever those lights are for you. For me, it's television, it's Today Show, or it's events, pop-ups. When those lights come on, I'm confident in it because I've practiced so much. And I would say that when it comes to you, for instance, right? Like you said, you were laid off, but before that, 4 months, when you had already started the podcast 4 months ago. And so you had already practiced to that point where once this happened, you pulled back that throttle. It was like, all right, like I've practiced this enough where I can kind of pump this up and I can increase my output because I know how to fail at it. I know how to, I've tested it out. You know what I mean? I've done the wrong things sometimes. Like I've messed it up a few times where when I'm ready to put full energy in it, I'm practicing the right thing and I'm practicing things that will make it better versus me starting at a baseline and practicing the discovery phase, right? Like working in advertising, if you build out a timeline, if you don't know what you're doing, in the beginning, you always give yourself time to discover. It's a discovery phase. And with me and you, we both were able to kind of discover while we still had an income with a job. And so since we were able to knock out that discovery phase, once you get past that, now you can start building that actual timeline and saying like, all right, we fail-proofed it. Like we figured out everything that can go wrong with it. We like poked it and let's see what it's about. And once you get past that phase, if you could do that comfortably, you could do it with a job. You could do it without a job too. It's just a little more
stressful.
Yeah, a little stressful, and you gotta be a little more smarter with your money when you're doing it that way. But if you can get that phase out the way, and you know what you're doing, by the time your moment come and those lights come on, you gotta perform. And it ain't really about when the lights come on, that's practice too. Like I got a TV show. Like we got 3 seasons of the TV show, and I'll still watch it as if I'm practicing. Like I watch it and I'll say like, all right, it don't really matter what I put on film because I know that I'll just keep watching it and getting better. And next time if I say I'm gonna take that out because I watch myself do it. But if I would have never done that piece, I would never be able to build off of that practice that I had. And so that's what it is. That's my biggest advice. Whenever it comes to anything, you gotta practice it and you gotta be intentional about your practice. And you gotta give yourself grace in that discovery phase, on a production timeline, 2 weeks. Give me 2 weeks and I'm gonna figure out how to break it. And then from there, we'll figure out how to fix it and build it. You gotta give yourself grace during that moment because it ain't gonna come overnight. Like in the beginning, I wouldn't be able to produce a pop-up like this that easily. But in that beginning phase, I messed up a whole lot, to the point now where it's just like I could do whatever food you want. It could be meatballs, it could be whatever you want, just like that. You just tell me what the budget is, and if I like it, I'll do it. You know what I mean? So that's what it is. You just gotta practice. That's my advice for anything.
And it doesn't always have to be perfect. That's the key too.
But that's what practice is. Practice is not perfect, and you won't get perfect from practice, but you'll get experienced, and that's what it is. Like your job as an entrepreneur, not even an entrepreneur, your job in general is to provide a service that is of service to somebody else. If you work in a corporate office, it's the same thing. Like you just don't have that entrepreneurial spirit because when you're in corporate, I don't know, like I've been in that position too where I basically execute your job description, right? But on this side, when you become entrepreneur, everything is entrepreneurial because I realize my job is to fix or is to help you solve a problem. That's what a job description is in a job, but it's just whatever your training is, whatever your education is, or whatever your ambition is, if you only know that you're supposed to go to college, you're supposed to get a job, if you lose that job, you're supposed to apply for another one, and you've never been to this side to realize what entrepreneurship actually is, just same thing, a job description, but for different needs, then you don't have that practice. But when you get on this side and you realize, like, all right, my job is to make your life easier. And in exchange for me doing this service to you, you gonna pay me for it. That's what I do. Like, that's the most simple version of what entrepreneurship is. And it just so happens that I use food as my vessel to do it. And in some instances, I get to use my mind. I get to use my creativity to solve problems. And so, yeah, like that's what it is.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's being open to inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wouldn't have even started, like, we're about to cook meatballs.
Oh, yeah.
With your meatballs, your Amazeballs.
Yeah.
And we're going to make something super yummy. And the idea of cooking with my podcast guests actually came from a previous podcast guest that I had on in the summer while I was going through the layoff. And it just came from this creative expression. Just me and him just talking after the podcast interview. We're like, oh my God, why don't we just cook together? It'd be so much fun. Then that's how this cooking with my podcast guests was formed, because the podcast really was born out of my passion for food, out of this cookbook that was a passion project, me relating to other people. And backing up, I before the interview, I was talking to you about how I had so much anxiety about getting myself out there, selling my book, talking to people, approaching people. Even working in a corporate environment, I thought CEOs and executive management were so much better than me, that I was so intimidated to approach people. I would have never gone up to you or anyone else and gone, can you be on my podcast? I approach people all the time, and you realize after you connect with someone that they're just like you.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone is out there wanting to create something, connect, and to create a community. I mean, that's ultimately what you have done, and what you've talked about. Your true passion is number one, to inspire others and to bring people together through your food, and to share that passion for your sauces, and to share that passion of your cooking with people. And I have found it so fulfilling to have connections. Like, when I have my podcast, after an interview, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so fired up. I'm so happy that I connected with that person. I'm creating a community.
Yep.
What has been the most fulfilling about this whole journey?
Sticking to the mission. Like, I remember when I started, it was just spread love through food. Like, that's all it was. Like, a very simple scope that's just like this. Like, it really doesn't have a definition. But once you start to do it, and you start to realize the impact that your food could have, and you kind of laid out that foundation of, like, all right, this is what's written. Spread love through food. Now go out and figure out what that means. I think that I've been able to manifest that in my own way. I remember when in Brooklyn, our kitchen was in Greenpoint. RIP Magic City. We used to have a kitchen. My Uncle Rich, he owned a place called Magic City, and it was an event space in the front, and in the back it was a shared kitchen space, and we'd be piled in there like sardines, like just everybody, just chaos. And then he'll be having like parties up front with like people on mushrooms, we in the back cooking, and they out there zeked out, and this is a DJ, and it was just like the most cool experience that I've ever had. And in there, I kind of like started to build my food community, and there was so many different chefs. Like, you got people in there who are doing hot pot dinners. You got people who are making kombucha, people who make chai tea concentrates. You got people making CBD candies, like just crazy things in there. You got wizard parties up front, like just wild things, right? Yeah. And so building just like this unorthodox and very diverse community of food things, people who do that in there. And then from there, we had there was a homeless shelter around the corner. And I remember all of our food, we would have leftovers sometime. And the first time we had leftovers, I tried to take it to the homeless shelter. And just because you really can't do that. Like it's safety concerns, it's whatever. Went there and they were like, no, you can't bring that in here. So I just set up across the street, took out my table, put the meatballs on there, heated them up. I was like, yo, tell everybody come through. Homeless shelter, not homeless people, but the people from the shelter came across the street, started serving them the meatballs every time we had leftovers. Until security guard came out one day and was like, yo, just come through. So then from there, they would allow me to bring the meatballs in. Or same thing with the protests. When she hit me up like, yo, we would like you to cater the protests and come up with a menu that is portable, that people would enjoy, fill them up. I mean, they're gonna be out here all day. And when I look at the mission, when I first decided to make the food and I came up with this idea, like, all right, I'm just gonna use food and spread love through it. That's what I meant. And I didn't know how I would do it and when I wrote it, but I knew that along the way, if I did these things, then it goes back to that mission of spreading love through food. And so I would say, like, that's been the most fulfilling part, just to be able to spread love through it. And then same thing with TV. Like, if you watch Mad Good Food, like, it's moments in there, especially season 3, where I'm able to, I talk about my grandma, right? Like, I talk about my grandmother and her struggles with depression and just like her upbringing and how, as an adult, I understand what grace means, right? Like in those moments. Or I'm able to talk about the first episode of season 3, we talked about my trip to Jamaica and just the resilience of the people and like going to a place and seeing only Black people. Like those type of experiences, being able to talk about those on TV and then present it in such a way where I talk about issues, but then bring it back to like making you smile about it. Like that's a form of spreading love through food, right? Like, and people, I'll see people in the street like, damn, are you the chef? Oh yeah, that's me. And then I watch your show all the time. Like, thank you for talking about your grandma. Thank you for doing this. Like, thank you for expressing that in that way because it affected me in this way. And I think all of those things, whether it's serving food in a protest, whether it's serving food at the homeless shelter, whether it's being on TV and allowing some person to look at me and have the words when it comes to them approaching these difficult situations in their family. Like that's what it is. Like I've been able to spread love through food, and I'm most proud of that because I stuck to my mission and I continue to do it. And I continue to find creative ways to do it and express myself through food.
And it's your purpose. Do you
Hell
feel like
yeah.
it's your purpose?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that it helps you continue on.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible.
Oh yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story
no
today.
doubt. Yeah.
Let everyone know where they can find you, follow you, find your show.
Well, you can find me on Instagram mostly. Relly Crocker is my personal account. Amazeballs is the business account. Grandma, she's everywhere. And then
Your logo.
It's my logo. This is based on the women in my family, and it looks like every Black grandma in America. Probably some Sicilian grandmas too might look like this as well.
Probably.
Yeah. So.
Probably.
Yep. So
And that's how you carry your story of your family with you.
Well, kind of. Yeah, but my lady, she was like, "Your grandma." She was like, this is my alter ego. Just how Urkel turns into Stefan.
Yes.
I feel like within my soul, there's this like nurturing grandmotherly figure who just wants to cook for people and like clean up their plate and just like feed them more food. Like, oh, get them off, man. And so I think it's like a version of me now that I like have been with it. To 2019 we created the logo, so like over the years I've just learned this is like an expression of myself. Like when you taste my food, it tastes like you had your grandma's meal, and the only way to describe it is Amazeballs.
I love that.
Yep.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So Amazeballs, they can find you at Amazeballs.
Amazeballs, and then the TV show it streams everywhere. It's 3 seasons of Mad Good Food through Tastemade. It's on.
I found it on YouTube.
Yep, it's on YouTube. It's on Hulu, Amazon Prime, Apple TV.
Okay.
Just Google Mad Good Food,
Okay.
and you'll see my beautiful face up there with a big smile. And that's pretty much it.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, and then Amazeballs, the pop-ups that we do in LA, yeah, you just go there and we post about it there.
I saw that, and you do it pretty much every weekend. A lot.
We try, yeah, we do. We've started picking it up a lot more now. So we're at a lot of different breweries. The meatballs that we're gonna make today, we're kind of like we're trying that method out to see how we can start to deliver them and ship them to people. So just be on the lookout and follow Amazeballs. And that's
You think you'll sell them online or to local stores?
Probably.
Okay.
Like we're looking at different options to sell it online, and then in stores that would be ideal, especially if we be local in LA and start to build up that community. So we'll see. But for now, we're just testing out this method, different approach to it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yep.
We're gonna go make some stuffed bread with his meatballs. So.
Ow. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it.